Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. Welcome back to the Legal Lounge. I'm excited to have my friend Randall with me today to talk about a pretty hot and sexy topic, at least it is to us, and that is money and marriage, both during the marriage and after. So Randall, tell the listener a little bit more about yourself.
So my name is Randall Avery. I'm a certified financial planner and chartered financial analyst. I primarily help individuals achieve their financial goals, and that usually means helping couples along their path. And this is going to be an exciting conversation because I get to talk to an attorney who sees this all day and every day. And we're going to go back and forth about is it really like managing money in a marriage and some of the negatives and positives about that journey.
Oh, that's huge. It's so interesting you mention finances in a marriage itself, because I always have the anecdote, maybe the listener has heard this story, is that I asked basically for an asset debt spreadsheet from my now husband, I think on our third or fourth date, because I was just very financially aware of the reality of how marriage and finances are intertwined. And it's a very interesting dynamic, but a real discussion that some couples don't always have during the marriage itself.
Yeah, a lot of times when I gain a client, their first time seeing their partner's finances is with me. And it's because there's a lot of shame, a lot of guilt when it comes to their finances. They don't really want to be open at a certain level. So it's been a fun journey dealing with couples and the ups and downs they go through.
Yeah, I love that because I'm sure at least 5 different stories or couple of situations have gone through your mind just then.
Yes. I think one is I think the big thing, because I work with a lot of attorneys, a lot of therapists, so they have doctorates, and it's the level of student loan debt. And you will not be surprised how many people will bury their head in the sand about their levels of student loan debt. So, and they haven't disclosed that to their partner. They date for years, they actually get married, and then when it comes to actually doing their bills together, that's when all of a sudden this $400,000 debt plus is right in front of their face.
Oh, that's a huge one. And actually that's an interesting point because obviously student loan debt is incurred by the individual. Sometimes before the marriage altogether, sometimes during the marriage, but in an individual name. Do you often see couples, whether it's right at the date of the marriage, like the date of the wedding, or soon after, combining any type of finances, like creating a joint account? Or do you see a lot of individuals keeping separate accounts?
It's usually by age. So the younger the client, the more prone they are to combine early on or even before they become married. What I usually see, because we're in the modern dating era where people actually live together before they become married, they'll start off with just one joint bank account. And that joint bank account manifests itself into their whole family or household financial structure. So usually a younger couple will combine faster. An older couple, it could take decades, or never at all. One of the surprising things about getting into this profession is people will go their whole lives not combining finances. I don't recommend it. But if it works for them, I can't doubt what works.
Yeah, that's interesting because I have heard differing opinions, especially when I talk to therapists. So, for example, some marriage therapists highly encourage couples to have some type of joint finances, or I've even seen some go all the way to everything should be joint. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that second opinion, but it's interesting to hear that a lot of couples, especially if they marry older, that they don't necessarily combine finances.
And it is also about a generational thing. I think back in the day when the male was expected to be the provider. Well, they really were not concerned with what their spouse earned. And they let them spend that money. So a little bit of this is generationally. Now, as we know how expensive life is, it takes two incomes. And that's just where we are today.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. And I'll just add a caveat here for anyone thinking about the legal implications of it. Unless there's a premarital agreement or prenup stating otherwise, the name on the bank account really does not matter, at least here in North Carolina, because it will be considered a marital asset if that bank account is created during the marriage. And even if the bank account was created prior to the date of marriage, if both parties either put it into a joint name or money is contributed during the marriage to said account, then it will have a marital interest. So that's another caveat, that just because it's in your sole separate name does not mean it's not part of the marital estate should a separation occur.
And we do see a behavior sometimes of hiding money. So, and I think that's so important. What you do is that discovery process, because sometimes that money is found and sometimes it's not found.
Yeah, that's very true too. Yeah, we have had to investigate further by tracing. Sometimes we'll even bring in a forensic accountant, and that's where we go through a known bank account and then see where money is coming and going and actually trace to all the other bank accounts where we see there's activity. I think when in one of my more infamous cases, there were like 6 or 7 accounts that we had to go through to find all the money.
I have to ask, is that like a spidey sense thing where it's like, okay, there's more money here, let me bring in somebody? Or is it automatic that you bring somebody in to scrub the numbers?
Well, it's automatic that we definitely go into investigating where the accounts are going and what numbers are going where. So for example, if we see deposits from a certain account and it's not clear, like for example, if it's a pay stub or pay from an employer, then we know that, okay, there is a regular deposit. But if there is a deposit from random accounts, or there's one account where there's a deposit or a draw on a regular basis, I need to know what that account is about. And it could be that, oh, it's just, an automatic deposit into a savings account. Cool. But if it's that account in the Cayman Islands, Randall, then we will need to know what's actually in the account before we move forward with any type of further negotiation. Or we may even have to go through a more intense discovery process to get those account details so that we know what we're looking at really and what exists. But to your point, there has been, it's reality, some things that we cannot find because there's only so many tools at our disposal.
Spot on. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So what are some other challenges? You mentioned student loans. What are some other challenges you see with couples during marriage as it relates to their finances?
My experience and just my lived experience as well, nobody marries the same person that they are financially. So either somebody's a spender, somebody's a saver. And even if they're both spenders, which is, I have a lot of clients like that as well, they have different vices. Some person wants to spend on eating out, another wants to spend on vacation, others cars, other person's golf clubs. It is amazing how different we come wired into a marriage and why we couple up. So it really comes down to people just having different interests and different priorities when it comes to their finances.
Yeah, and I think clarifying those priorities, or at least being very honest about your own priorities, right? So maybe we don't want to admit that we have to get a monthly massage, or go one step further, 2 or 3 monthly therapy sessions, right? But at the end of the day, that does have a financial implication, regardless if it's being paid out of your separate account or a joint account.
And people are getting married older. So what happens is they develop habits. So I develop a habit of going to therapy. I develop a habit of getting my nails done. I give a habit of getting my hair done. Well, those habits, I don't want to change. And if I feel encouraged to change, I feel like somebody's trying to control me. Mm-hmm. So it automatically starts some type of fights because we have developed certain habits as we go older.
Oh, that's a great point. And there's also the interest that you want to continue, right? I know my husband, he loves to spend on technology. And I don't think, Randall, we should get a new TV every year. But at the end of the day, what's more important, my marriage or this dispute about a TV? And so sometimes we have to pick and choose our battles when we're talking about finances and certain vices that we have come to pretty much expect, because this is how we've always spent our money.
Yeah, and me as a saver, of course, I want to save. I like seeing my account go up a certain amount every single month. But like you said, when you become married, that same savings rate is not going to exist. And I do have to value my marriage more than, I guess, a certain wealth number that I have in my head. And that is a tough, tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that can lead to a lot of marital discord if both parties aren't honest, not only with themselves, but with the other party.
And there's a term that nobody talks about. We hear on TV all the time. We hear about infidelity, but there's a term called financial infidelity, and it especially affects as we get older and build a certain level of assets. Some people would actually prefer the traditional infidelity than the financial infidelity. Just imagine somebody, you've built up $400,000 in savings, and somebody gambles that away in one weekend because they have a vice. How gut wrenching is that? How hard will it be to forget that act versus any other type of infidelity act? So the financial infidelity is something, and it hurts. It hurts a lot.
Yeah, it sure does. Especially if there is a representation made, right? So it's one thing to know that your spouse likes to go to the casino and goes once a month or once, every weekend, right? But it's another thing to know that they're not only spending play money, they're actually spending your life savings that both parties have been contributing to possibly for decades.
Yeah, and it starts off like he was able to control it, put it on a credit card, and then it just seeps out. And let's be honest, we're both married. Marriage is stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And if gambling is somebody's outlet, when tough times are tough, when it's the worst time for that to happen, that's when it blows up, and that's when they possibly come knock at your door.
Yeah, it's true. And I see that a lot, because a lot of people do come to me and they ask, what causes people to divorce? And personally, my stance is the number one reason is lack of communication or inability to communicate effectively. And I would say one of the top topics, if not the top topic, is finances. Because if you cannot at least communicate, even if you make a financial mistake to your significant other, then it's almost like that snowball effect. Then it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to hide this expenditure. I'm just going to hide this gambling debt, or I'm going to hide this purchase. And I remember one time my husband wanted something and I said, look, I personally do not agree with that decision. And we had a little tiff about it. And I told him, I'm like, honestly, I will support you in whatever you want to do. I just personally wouldn't do it. And what did he do? He went and did it. But at least we're able to communicate about it, right? And I can't hold it against him necessarily, because that's one thing that he valued. And yes, it luckily didn't go into ruining our savings or anything like that.
And I tell everybody, you have to go on the financial journey with your spouse. So if your spouse isn't as conservative you are, or if your spouse even is not as liberal as far as spending money as you are, you have to go on that journey. And hopefully, it doesn't always happen, you guys will somehow merge and come together. One person will get a little bit more loose in the pockets, the other one will tighten up a little bit. But you have to let that person be a person, because if you take that away from them, they will act up in other places.
Yes, yes. And that will create even more of a strain on the marital relationship. And so sometimes what I would advise, instead of trying to control someone's spending or say what they can and cannot do, possibly work on different ways of communication and being curious and seeing maybe do they want to buy the new TV, or is it because they just want to be able to watch a sporting game more often? And hell, maybe going to the sporting game live would be cheaper than the new TV and more exciting. So there's just different ways that couples can work through some of these issues, even if they're not the most obvious.
Yeah, because I've noticed that, like you said, not bad, but the adverse spending behavior, adverse to your financial situation, is usually root of something. And open about it, talk about it. I think over time you can get to the root cause, but it's hard because people shut down so fast. And one of the benefits of working with me is, well, I'm a guest in the house. Hopefully you don't shut down in front of me, even though that has happened a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen that too, where it's like, I'm your advocate. I'm here to help you. But if you don't trust me and you don't want to tell me, then our hands, if you will, uh, become tied because we're not able to help as much as we could otherwise.
There's no conversation more romantic than discussing a prenup with your partner, right? Okay, maybe the song for your first dance does a bit more in the romance department. Speaking of emotions, though, the prenup is a very legal document that everyone has a very emotional reaction to. Many people avoid the prenup conversation because they feel it is an indication that the marriage will fail. But here's the truth: half of all marriages already fail, regardless of whether the spouses had the prenup conversation or not. If you or someone you care about is getting married, would knowing what marriage involves legally be important? What about having the difficult conversations surrounding finances, career aspirations, and pursuing parenthood prior to the wedding date? If you are looking to build a solid foundation for your marriage, or you want the same for someone you care about, we are here to help you learn more about prenups from a position of knowledge, not emotion. To learn more about family law from a legal professional, book a consultation with a member of the Modern Legal team by visiting our website, emailing us, or calling us at 704-286-6302. Check out the information about Modern Legal services at modernlegalnc.com.
Now, one of the things we have to talk about is sometimes the financial situation actually keeps folks married.
Yes, that's true too.
I wonder your opinion. I think there's some good and bad to that. One of the beautiful things about marriage is, they have to come see you to separate. So it's a little bit of friction. So people can't instantly hop up and make a decision. Similar to their finances, because there's some benefit of economies of scales of two incomes coming together. Some people may pause before they make that step. What is your thoughts on that?
So I have actually had that happen. So I have had consultations with individuals who are trying to understand how the law would be applied to their specific situation. And more than once, I have heard a prospective client saying, I don't want to do therapy. I don't want to do couples counseling. My spouse just spends too much money and they tend to be like the saver. And they're like, well, what will happen to all my savings? And I have to tell them, if the savings are a marital asset, then in North Carolina, they're subject to distribution, which equitable distribution is presumed to be 50-50. So yeah, that $1 million that you have in a brokerage account, you would leave with 50% and the other spouse would leave with 50%. But Theresa, they didn't contribute their hard-earned money. They didn't make the decisions of what investments to actually invest in. Oh, I hear you. But unless you have a prenup or some other type of spousal agreement stating otherwise, if it's part of the marital estate, expect to give 50% away. And it's interesting. I remember one prospective client, he even responded and said, you know what? I guess marriage counseling is a lot cheaper than half of my investment accounts. And I was like, yes, sir. And hell, you might even find out you love one another a lot more than you realize.
Yeah, because, I've done this long enough. And I think who you love is a choice. It is a choice that you have to wake up every single day and invest into it. And yes, you can fall out of love, but I think you can equally fall back in love if two parties are willing to do it, because the grass is not always greener.
Yes, that is so true. And go one step further, there's a lot of unexpected costs in the divorce process, even when it's done amicably. So, for example, to change your status from married to single, you do have to file a complaint for divorce. And with that complaint, you do have to pay filing fees and you do have to wait a certain amount of time. And you might have other fees associated with that divorce, such as changing the insurance on your car, refinancing your mortgage, and suddenly your interest rate is now higher than it had been on the joint mortgage. And there's all these ripple effect costs from a financial perspective that I see time and time again, prospective clients not even thinking about when they're thinking about ending the relationship.
I have to ask, how often, how far do they go down the process and turn back away? Are the emotions so high? So much is invested in the identity of being single again. where does it drop off? We watch
Yeah.
YouTube videos and there's a drop off point. Like where does that happen on that journey?
It's interesting you ask that because it's so unique to the individual. So I have had prospective clients call and they're like, no, I'm going to stay in the marriage, and they work things out. I have prospective clients who call and they're like, I have been a roommate for the past 30 years. And so they actually divorced in their minds, if you will, 30 years ago. We're just doing the paperwork and finalizing everything now. I have had the case where one couple, they divorced and remarried. So they remarried, or they got married 4 times. So there was the initial wedding and they got divorced 3 times. And then remarried again. Why? Because at the end of the day, they were meant for each other, even if it was a very volatile and litigious relationship.
I can only imagine how fun that relationship was.
Yeah,
go through that
definitely
3
roller
times.
coaster. Yeah.
Because most people who divorce do not plan on getting married again, because it is tough. Now let's talk about the cost of actually when you get divorced. You talked about the filing fees. You talked about so let's talk about the true financial burden of divorce. And let's begin with you, because they start with you coming to you about fees and assessments. Like, what is that journey like? And we'll go into my end of life.
Sure. So, I mean, there's always the initial consultation fee. Very few attorneys out there, at least in the state of North Carolina, provide a free consultation. And that's just because we have a high demand for family law attorneys. And there is the reality that should I consult with one party to a marriage, I'm then conflicted from representing the other party in the divorce process. So there's that consultation fee. And consultation fees in North Carolina, I would say, generally range from anywhere from $200 to like $1,000 for the consultation. Generally, they're scheduled for like an hour, could be a little longer, a little less, depending on a client specific circumstance. And then from there, it's really dependent. Fees are really dependent on the complexity of a person's spousal situation. So, for example, if their spouse is very controlling, very angry, very emotional, very unpredictable, then we will likely have to be involved a lot more. So that could be in a lot more negotiations. Maybe we do mediation, but we have multiple mediation sessions. Or maybe it's the prospective client is coming to me because the other spouse already filed a lawsuit. And so lawsuits will always be more expensive than negotiating or mediating, simply because at that point we have to follow the litigation process, which is imposed upon us by the judicial system. And there is nothing fast about the judicial system. So our quote unquote fast cases, I would hope, get resolved in about 2 years. And so if someone has only been married, say, for 3 years, I tend to tell people, do you really want to litigate, or can we try to reach at least a partial agreement, if not a full resolution to a party's case? And hourly rates for attorneys, again, are also arranged. So you have hourly rates as low as probably $200, maybe $175 per hour, to probably $1,000 per hour, depending on the attorney that you are seeking. I do want to encourage the listener to know that if you are searching for a quote unquote bulldog attorney, or an attorney that has a lot of litigation experience, then you're looking at an attorney on the higher end of that hourly rate. Go one step further. You also want to look for a law firm that has a team, because luckily then they'll have other team members that can assist at lower hourly rates than just the lead attorney. But then, yes, you have the filing fees. Maybe you have to bring in an appraiser to appraise the house. So you have an appraiser fee. If you sell the house, you're going to have a realtor fee. If you have any type of formal evaluation, whether it's a forensic accountant tracing those bank accounts we were talking about earlier, or you have a forensic therapist who comes in to try to make a recommendation on what is best for the children, they all cost money. All of these individuals cost money. And so those are all added costs aside from the actual distribution of funds, either for property distribution, like splitting the marital assets and debts, or family support, like child support and spousal support, like alimony and post-separation support here in North Carolina. And I feel like that's just the tip of the iceberg, but great question. Love that question, Randall.
And what people have to realize, you're doing the legal aspect that they have to show up for what the parts have to show up. But usually in practical cases, sometimes you're still in the same house with your spouse.
Yes.
During that time, you guys still have to live life. You still have to pay a mortgage. You still have bills, and really think about the flow of how you pay your bills, how this money is being spent and separated. And what people have to realize, it's kind of a sticky situation, because what would you say? I know, every situation varies, but a typical couple, what is the average time it takes to actually be completely separated legally?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, some people may never get completely separated legally because they have a child in common, right? Or one spouse keeps the last name of the other spouse. And so from a legal perspective, you're always going to run into issues. And there is a certain aspect of, when you said, I will marry this person for the rest of my life through sickness and in health, some of that's still going to attach, even if legally you're divorced. We try to start some of this separation as quickly as possible. So for example, if the parties only have a joint bank account, we generally recommend go ahead and at least create a separate bank account, start contributing to that separate bank account, especially if the parties have already separated. But in terms of a total, complete separation, I mean, hopefully soon after the divorce judgment is put in place, but not always.
And what I've seen in my client situation is even after the divorce, sometimes still living together, maybe functionally for the kids. So there's a lot of different situations. So now that, let's say you have the official paperwork and you decide to go out on your own, the big thing that's on the news right now is housing costs. Now you have to go out and find a new living situation. And as if anybody has moved, we all know that it's not just the cost or the payment. There's a setup cost when you move to another place. You have to furnish the house because usually you don't get 100% of the furniture. There's some things as far as some slight maintenance you want to do to actually make the house a home. How have you seen folks deal with that initial step up and leave, and now I'm independent and in my own home, our living space?
It can be a very tricky situation, is what I'll say. You do have a lot of individuals who may not even get that much furniture because they don't want the negative emotional attachment to said property. And so I have had a number of cases where, I represent the client that has moved out, that has found a new apartment. Sometimes we have to utilize the resources that we have within our network to get them a place to live. And yeah, the first night they're definitely sleeping on an air mattress, hopefully with some sheets they just bought from TJ Maxx. So it's one of those situations that sometimes it feels like you are starting from complete scratch. And what I remind my clients is, it may feel like that because you don't have as much furniture, you don't have as much money coming in, you are paying for this apartment with a single income instead of dual incomes, but you're not starting from scratch because you're starting from a position with the life lessons that have brought you to this point. And at the end of the day, if you believe it's best for you to move forward separated and pursuing a divorce from your soon-to-be ex-spouse, then that's what's healthy for you. And at the end of the day, you are the only person who can live your life. So it's up to you to make those decisions and then find the resources such as yourself and me to support you along that path. And don't worry, I'll help you shop for furniture if you really need some assistance.
And I think one thing people have to realize is there is going to be at times, a slight lifestyle adjustment.
Yes.
What I've had to counsel certain clients on is they're used to, let's say, going on vacation twice a year, eating out at certain restaurants, attending certain social clubs. Especially initially, let's say the first 1 or 2 years, there has to be a slight adjustment on your expectations on how you spend and live life. And I think another thing that's not talked about, and it's buried somewhere, and I see it a lot, is the cost of child support and alimony.
Yes.
And how that affects how you move financially moving forward. Child support and alimony, it may not be a cost that fully covers the cost of a child, but it is still a burden to the payer.
Mm-hmm. It is. And go one step further, it's never going to be enough, right? It never is, because you're going from a household, say with two incomes, and suddenly in one household, and suddenly you have two households. And regardless of what a court or a judge or an attorney can do, we still do not have the ability to suddenly duplicate income and duplicate houses, right? So there's going to be an adjustment to lifestyle. There's going to be an adjustment to finances. And it could be, yeah, you have to tighten up your belt a little to get through this stage. The hope, though, is that, as you know, has shown historically in our economy, is that money does grow, ability to earn more income does increase. And so the hope is that once you are separated, wherever you're restarting at will get better. And it's similar to, you know, when everyone left their parents' home, you had to start from somewhere and then you built from there. But again, you're not building from scratch. You're building with the wealth of knowledge and information and hopeful resources once the marital estate and family support issues are resolved from the separation and divorce process.
And what I see a lot of times is in a partnership, a couple, there's one person who's heavy in the finances, manage the finances, pay the bills. There's other one who's more of a rider, being passive. Now, to the person who now divorced was the passive person, and they may have been that passive rider for a couple years, maybe even decades, and they may be the higher income earner. They just weren't in the day-to-day finances.
Yeah.
They literally have to sit down and this is the B word, create a budget.
What a really horrible B word, Randall.
Horrible. You know, how much does the utilities cost in the winter and in the summer?
Yeah.
How much does a car note house? How much am I paying on interest rates? All these little financial decisions you have to relearn as if you were a young 20-year-old. And that is, first of all, it is okay. And trust me, people will be patient with you. You will make mistakes, but you do have to go on that financial literacy journey, which I highly recommend folks do.
Oh, yes. And honestly, even if we're talking to a listener who is still in a marriage, happily married, going on a financial journey to know for yourself, even if you are not that financially savvy spouse between the two of you, I think is a critical skill, because then that reinforces your ability to communicate and understand when you are having a financial dispute or just a misunderstanding. And I can't tell you how often, Randall, especially during the pandemic, where parties were coming to me and my clients would say, hey, we had to start living from savings. I didn't clearly convey that financial need to my spouse, and they now think I'm cheating, or they think I'm wasting money some way, shape, or form. And, you know, who knows, because if they were able to communicate it about finances early on, maybe my client would not actually have come to me or been in my office, because they would have been able to work through that, that financial circumstance together instead of one person just doing it in secret.
I spot on agree. And to the person in the relationship who, let's say, is a little bit more financial savvy than the other, it is actually slightly your responsibility to let the person, even though they kick and scream and say, I don't want to know anything about it, let them in. Mm-hmm. Show them the account list. Show them the username and the passwords to your bank account. Because if something happens to you, you become incapacitated, you become hurt, they still have to run your financial household. And you don't want people scrounging around, going to banks, getting documents, just because they don't really know what's going on. So still be patient. Trust me, it's going to be a headache. They're going to kick and scream, but show enough love to your partner of what could happen to let them in on your financial situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not to mean that you want someone to feel uncomfortable about the financial circumstance or the reality. Look, I know that one client I was referencing earlier, he felt a little embarrassed. He's like, I wish I made enough money to get us through. I wish we didn't have to dip into savings because of this global pandemic. And that is a story and heartfelt, concern or worry that multiple people have expressed to me, both inside my office and outside, just in general with friends and family. at the end of the day, we all live on this same planet. We all work through different financial circumstances. So why not, even if it's awkward and even if you don't want to do it, why not be open and honest about the finances in a marriage?
Yeah, and I think your partner is your partner for a reason. So go on just like a subconscious level. You guys are usually partnered together because of pheromones, sub-thinking. You guys are put together. They will actually intuitively know solutions to your financial situation that you're missing because you have a natural blind spot and you guys were paired together for a reason. So you may actually be surprised, like, my partner doesn't know anything about finances. Why should I let them in? They're going to come up with solutions. They're going to come with innovative ways that actually allow you to enjoy your money more. So allow that to happen and just enjoy life, in my opinion.
Oh, yes. Actually, that reminds me of a quote. It says, enjoy yourself. It's later than you think. So
wow. Yeah.
I'll leave us on that. Well, Randall, we could obviously talk about finances and marriage and divorce all day, but I'm going to let you go for now. But before you go, can you tell the listener where to find you if they want to learn more about your services and what you do?
Sure. Like you said, my name is Randall Avery. I'm a certified financial planner, chartered financial analyst. I work in the Atlanta metro area, but I do service clients across the United States. If you visit my website, that's the best way to find me and my information is www.deasilwm.com. That's deasilwm.com. If you're not looking for a financial planner, but would like a roadmap, I am the author of the book, Hacking the System by Creating Your Own System. It's on Amazon right now, just to kind of prime and get you ready about what financial things you need to have in hand. And I'm open for a free consultation, so please check out my website.
Well, Randall, you just added another book to my book stack. Thank you very much. But that sounds like a great resource, and I'll add it to my reading list.
Awesome.
Thank you, Randall, for being with us today, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.